Welcome, everyone, to Coffee with a Poet. And I'm so glad you joined us. And we are here in the studio with Rowan Reynolds. And thank you for joining us in the studio today, Rowan.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you bet. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and a little bit about your background.
Okay, well, I was born in England. I came to the States in 2009 with my family. It was my husband's job relocation. That's why we came. I am a graduate in history. I've always enjoyed history, particularly social history. I love the concept of the impact on the common man or woman, you know. Not so interested in, in the big military leaders, but how it affected those who were having to deal with it. And that sort of brings me on to family history. I like family history too.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a lot of my poetry comes from family history stories that I heard from my mother.
Right. Excellent. Wonderful. How long have you been writing?
A long time. I started journal keeping when I was 12. I was really inspired by the Diary of Anne Frank and was about the same age. So thereafter I kept a journal, and sometimes I did some poetry in my teens and 20s, but then I had a family, I had 4 children. So there wasn't really much time for anything, and maybe a brief entry into the journal now and again. But once they were grown and I was introduced to the local poetry club in Colorado Springs, I thought I'd better start, So I started writing a bit more.
Excellent. Wonderful. And how do you start a poem or a story or a prose? Do you start with an image or something what inspires you?
It's usually something on my mind, maybe something I've watched or something I've heard about. Could even be the weather, Recently there was a bad storm and I got thinking about some family history about a family friend who was in Stalingrad in World War II, and I got thinking about how that would have been with a horrible winter and so forth.
Right. Okay, let's talk about your poem that we're going to discuss today, Strangely Spacious Deck, and it is kind of on the verge of our anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic, which is April 15th.
Yep.
And so let's talk a little bit about about that poem.
Okay, well, I mentioned my mother. She was a great storyteller. And it happened when she was about 10 years old. Her mother took her to visit a family friend. And it turned out this lady, who was called Alice Louch, was a Titanic survivor. And that day, for some reason, she told my mother, as I say, who was about 10, all about her experience. And then many years later, my mother told me about the Titanic and this lady. And it was, as you hear about it in the media, really, she and her husband had gone on the Titanic. It was a 25th wedding anniversary, and they saw this wonderful ship and decided to buy their tickets, and they got on the ship, and all was going well until that night when they had just gone to bed, and they felt the ship like a bump, and it was a second bump as well. And they thought perhaps they better go up on deck, see what was going on. And of course, really, the rest is history. But her husband put her in a boat, gave her a shawl, a blanket, to try and keep her warm, because, as we all know, it was very, very cold that night. And she got into the boat, and as the boat was lowered, so a baby from nowhere was thrown into her arms. And so she wrapped the baby up with the shawl, and went on, and they were all rescued by, well, they weren't all rescued. Some of them were rescued by the Carpathia, and that was her story. I have no idea what happened to the baby, but she returned to England, and then years later related the story to my mother.
What an amazing story. It would really be nice to know what happened to the baby.
Wouldn't it? Yes. Yeah. And I've looked, obviously there's lots of information about Titanic these days, and I found the boat she was in and everything. There's no mention about this baby. So I don't know what happened, but that, and as I'm telling you, of course, all this information came from my mother. Some of it I've confirmed, some of it, I haven't. So we're talking, the experience came from Mrs. Louch, went to my mother, passed on to me.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for sharing this piece. Can you share a little bit about some people's reaction when you read this piece?
Yes, one of my friends, she said, I've taken the poem from Alice Louch's perspective, yes. And my friend said she felt that it was, she felt the fear and the stress, the panic. I think stress is almost a stupid word in this situation. The panic, the fear of what was going on that night. Because it must have been horrendous that they didn't have enough lifeboats, you know, right. As we all know. But, and I think it's so sad that it took this massive disaster to bring about huge changes in maritime law. That obviously now there are lifeboats enough for everybody. There are planes that patrol the seas for ice. Ship radios are always on, which, you know, none of those things came to pass on that horrible night.
Yes,
so.
Right. So your piece, this piece was that you're going to read about the Titanic, called "The Strangely Spacious Deck," was recently published in an anthology.
Yes.
And there is a picture that I'm curious about of the ticket. Yeah. Is that a picture of the ticket that you provided for the book? It
is. It's one that I found when I was looking at all the various information you can find about Titanic. Okay. But yes, it was. They told everyone it was unsinkable. Yeah. You know. So
I'd like to also share that with the audience as well. So we'll share that picture as well. So anything else that you want to tell us about?
Yes. The aspect of pride goeth before a fall. You know, I believe that in 1912, British Empire was still going and everything, and this concept of the biggest, the best, as was claimed about Titanic and many other things, that is something that I think we all need to be very wary of being boastful and so forth, because it seldom works out, you know, because there really is unsinkable, unbeatable. Yeah, it's a bit of it's a tricky path, I think, to take.
Exactly, right. So would you like to read the piece?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
The Strangely Spacious Deck. A silver anniversary and much to celebrate. A time to do something different, exciting and fun. A transatlantic voyage, a maiden voyage. A brand new ship, gleaming and bright. The artist's drawings look so fine. Shall we book our passage and go? Oh yes. All agreed, money's paid. The months go by, it is spring. The gardens are filled with daffodils, bursting with colour, but it's not hard to leave. Letters have been written back and forth. Relatives in New York await their visit. Packing done, ready to leave. America calls. Excitement rules their hearts. A train to Southampton, and there she is, huge, like a tall building tethered to the dock. They get on board and walk the deck, the strangely spacious deck. They can smell new paint. They sit on new chairs. Everything is beautiful. They are on their way. The wonderful dining room with exquisite food, their cabin is a delight, and they love it all. It is Sunday, and a church service is enjoyed. The captain speaks, and they sing hymns, those in peril on the sea. But it's calm, and there seems no peril at all. It's another lovely day, making new friends, trying new things, and always walking on that strangely spacious deck. To bed again in their lovely cabin, bliss. They talk late into the night. So many plans. A bump, what's that? Another bump, that's odd. Concern, what's happening? They wait, they talk. They hear noise, shouting and running about. Unsure, let's dress, let's see. The strangely spacious deck is in chaos. Terrified sailors work with lifeboats. They seem unsure how to do all this. Did they not train? Of course they did. Evacuate ship. What? Women and children first. It can't be. Their cabin is so lovely, and it's cold out here. The strangely spacious deck is no longer spacious. People are crying and saying goodbye. She's in a queue for a lifeboat. They embrace quickly, and he gives her a shawl. "See you later and stay warm," he says, and she goes, but he stays with all the other men. The boat is lowered, and people scream. It's dark, and the sea is forever. And then from nowhere, a baby dropped into her arms. What to do? She looks up, more screaming, more chaos. She is shaking with fear and cold. They splash into the freezing water. "Stay warm, wrap the baby in the shawl." Yes, of course, that's it. Focus on the baby. She can't see him anymore. He'll join her later, she is sure. There seems to be a mountain by the ship. What is that? Look after the baby. Stay warm. The sailor row and rows, sweat and tears running down his face. "Must get away from the sinking ship," he cries. "How can it be sinking? It's brand new." She can hear the musicians playing on that once spacious deck. They played in that wonderful dining room. Was that just hours ago? It's so cold and dark. All of them quietly weep. The only light is from the ship. Then a horrible grinding crack pierces the night air. Lights go out. Music stops. Spacious deck descends. The beautiful ship disappears as if it never was. Darkness. Cries turn into silence. A huge sky of stars. Sudden new widows and orphan children look in horror and disbelief. They wait on an endless, empty sea. Their dreams are gone.
Thank you so much for reading that, Rowan. It's just such an important part of history. I know. And I know that you kind of talked about what you wanted the listeners to get from the reading of that piece.
Yes. Firstly, I think the tragedy of it all. Just checking my notes here. A disaster that could have been avoided. And I go back to pride. Mm-hmm. I just feel it was pride that took her down. And, in any season, that pride is a disaster. Mm-hmm. And that people must come first. People's safety must come first, whichever class they're in. The statistics show it in the Titanic. Those in first class, the women in first class and the children in first class, they were the majority of people who got off that ship, which is the shocking thing to see today. But back then, that's sort of how things were. So let's be grateful it's not so much like that now.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. And let us know, how do you see yourself in the future writing? You have some projects you're working on, or ideas for your next book, or?
Yeah, I think it'll be more family history stuff. As I say, there are many stories that my mother told me. She was born in 1915, so she spanned all those, World War II and the Depression, and a lot of interesting things, and particularly interested in the social side of World War II. So I think there'll probably be more from that time period, more from notes that I have of what I've been told about things in my family.
Right. Okay.
I wanted to just finish with how I took my mother, who was then in her 80s, to see the 1997 Titanic. And she brought a walking stick with her, and she kept poking me with a walking stick and saying, "This is not how it was described to me." I don't think she liked the romance bit, So, but one of the opening scenes in Titanic, where old Rose is talking about how everything was new. When I was watching it previous time, that was actually one of the things that kicked off the poem, because she, even though she was a fictional character, she was saying how they could smell the new paint. China had never been used, never slept in the beds, the sheets were all new, everything was brand new. And you sort of think when you go into a place like that and everything's new, and it's exciting, isn't it? And anyway, that sort of got me thinking a bit about how it would have been for Alice Louch and her husband.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, we love your work and we appreciate you sharing. All right. Well, thank you everyone for being with us, and join us on a next adventure on another video, and make sure you subscribe, and we will see you later. Thank you.